Welcome to College Recruiter, where we believe that every student and recent grad deserves a great career. I'm Anna Peters, Content Manager, and today I am joined by Cy Wakeman, and we're going to be talking about how entry-level employees can build their leadership skills. Cy is president and founder of Cy Wakeman, Inc., which helps organizations come to believe that with leadership integrity, managerial courage, which I particularly like, and an environment of accountability, people can truly succeed. She says, in spite of the facts. So you'll have to tell us what you mean by that.
Exactly.
So I also like that you're a drama researcher.
Yes.
So that makes you even more interesting as a person. Quickly, I'll say Cy's SHRM 2018 conference presentation. She'll be a speaker at SHRM 2018 conference, and her presentation is a mega session titled How HR Leaders Can Cut the Cost of Drama and Entitlement and Derive Big Results. So anyone going to SHRM conference in June should check that out. Thanks for joining us.
You are welcome. My pleasure.
Well, so I've got some questions for you. Let's talk about early career professionals that are looking for mentors and other role models to learn from. Sometimes learn bad habits from, let's say, quote unquote, bad managers. What are some common characteristics that an entry-level employee might find in their managers that they should not copy? Like, don't do this, even though you might see it, kind of advice.
Yeah. Because I research drama, I do look a lot at bad behaviors, ways in which leaders fuel the drama rather than release it. And one of the things that I see leaders doing that I hope that new in your career folks move far away from is what I would call sympathizing. And sympathizing is when I see that you're struggling and I'm your leader, and I think it's helpful to affirm for you your struggle and agree with you and collude with you that the issue is your circumstances, that we're the victims of our circumstances. I teach leaders to use empathy, and it's a hard habit to break for them. Empathy is, I see you're struggling, and now I'm going to move you into self-reflection and call you up to greatness. So a quick example is I watched somebody walk through the airport, and they were texting on this flip phone they'd had since high school. And I was very frustrated with them because they kept running in and in front of us, and they were just really blocking everybody's way of getting out. And they were so engrossed in their phone that they tripped on the curb and they fell into the taxi lane. They were just like splat laying out there. And the thing I use to show managers the difference is sympathy, as I would get down beside them and say, you poor thing,
yeah.
The streets of Dallas are unfit for texting. We should march on City Hall. How did they expect us to do business? Empathy, I'm still very kind. Are you okay? But the call to greatness comes from, let me give you my observations. It appears that your texting practice ends in painful situations. What could you do? Perhaps stop skipping upgrades or discover Siri or something so that you can text freely in the world.
Yeah.
And that's the bad habit I see, especially with people young in the field, is they have people sympathize and collude with them, and together they decide that the circumstances are their problem. And what I mean by succeeding is by your circumstances is your circumstances are not the reasons you can't succeed. They're the reality in which you must succeed. So a great leader doesn't let you in that victim-minded thinking. They call you up to where do you need to get skilled next to be awesome at working in the current environment.
That's great. I mean, that's really tricky to do too, because it's so much easier to blame other people for your lack of success. You know what it makes me think of too is parenting.
Yeah, exactly, Anna.
If you fall off your chair, first, are you okay?
Yeah.
But next time, do you think that you should be sitting like that on the edge?
Exactly.
Like standing on the chair?
Yeah, and even look for mentors that will help you grow rather than collude with you. Mom, I forgot my backpack. Bummer.
Yeah.
What have you thought about getting through your day successfully without your backpack? Right. And so our jobs is
bring it to you. Right.
Exactly. Our jobs as leaders and where I want people early in their career to find leaders and mentors are the ones that when you're in low self and venting, they help toggle you into high self and self-reflection,
Mhm.
where you find you can have impact and take accountability and move in there in new ways.
Yeah.
And I think it's important.
That's great. That takes a lot of practice on when I think of the entry level employee who is now wearing their professional hat, not their college student hat, because some, not all, may have received a lot of hand holding throughout college.
Yeah.
And to be wearing that employee hat takes a lot of like you said, self-reflection. And that's a practiced behavior.
It is. So why not start practicing in college,
Exactly.
right?
Oh, yes.
Because,
Start now.
Friday night, if you're of age, we grab the beer and complain about all of our faculty. Why not really seek out and be exclusive in the people you're with who don't collude you and feed into your corrupted
Hmm.
view of reality? It's all
Hmm.
that ego feed. And I even think there's big danger in having one or two or three mentors, because to get the good, you also get so exposed to all the ineffective and the negative. I
Hmm.
really advise people, it's wonderful to have a few key mentors, but no, that is a super mixed bag.
Hmm.
Why not use a new form of mentoring, which is crowdsourcing? So why not, when people ask me, like, who should I look to for a mentor, or they look to me, I say, stop looking for the whole package in a single
In
person.
one person.
Right, because 50% of how they got to their vice president job is pure luck and privilege. And I mean, seriously,
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
by owning this company, privilege and luck, folks. There's a
Come
lot
on,
of,
give yourself some credit.
yeah, 50% is I have great contact and work my butt off. But a lot of this, let's be clear, there could be so many other people in this seat, but we put too much. The whole mentor philosophy doesn't make sense to me, because we put a lot. When I say you're my mentor, I've now narrowed the world view and world experience down to the intersections that are you, and now I'm just getting those 10 pinpoints
Mhm.
of career advice or so what I like to say in today's world, the way you should handle your own mentoring is be a good curator of incredible suggestions and updates. So curate your blogs, curate your podcasts, curate the conferences you're going to. Make sure that your life is incredibly diverse so that you're getting world views.
Yeah,
And so I like to crowdsource my mentoring.
that's
And
great.
and that's what I do, so that no one person's over responsible for me,
That's
right?
great. I like that. I suppose, though, that one benefit to having an individual, or maybe two or three individuals who do help you along your way, is their network. Be able to tap
Yeah,
into that,
that's
which a
true.
crowdsourcing approach wouldn't be able to do for you.
Well, except for, I would tell you, since I'm so involved in social media, that it does at times do that for you, because I really help a lot of people make connections, because I've got 50,000 Twitter followers and
Mm-hmm.
26,000. So
Mm-hmm.
I want to blow people's minds and think about, in the past we waited for the one person to make the introduction.
Sure.
The modern way is there's a lot of ways to get the introduction. I
Yeah.
do like the personal touch with personal mentors. Um, I like to do it for limited amounts of time with clear-cut goals
Hmm.
in that relationship. But a lot of what you're talking about too, that mentor making introductions, actually means they're a sponsor, not a mentor. A mentor, when they make an introduction, tends to tell all of your flaws and your successes, right? Because they've worked so intimately with you, especially with women to women. So when they make the introduction to the person, they're like, I've known these guys or this person for 3 years, and they had a lot of struggles. And they come from kind of a tough background, but they're really great. That wasn't helpful, right?
That's not a good sell.
But a sponsor comes in and says, I have the perfect candidate for you, and keeps
Yeah.
private. And I've
Yeah.
seen
Oh,
mentors think they're helping because they're so close to you and your work. But when you get to the job world, um, mentors that are too close to you share too much, in my opinion. You want sponsors, not
mhm,
mentors. And
mhm.
sponsors just know your work and your professional life. Mentors know when you're sobbing on the couch
Sure.
because somebody said something mean to you. They don't mean to do this, but if I had my choice of two people making introductions for me, I would want a more equal sponsor
Yeah. Someone who's
who,
truly advocating. Great.
Yeah, exactly. Just something to think about.
Sure. So the takeaway I would say for an entry-level employee is to really don't assume that if you have a mentor, especially for employers that have like a formalized mentorship program,
Yeah, true.
don't assume that you're set, you're golden, your mentor is going to pave the golden path for you. You really do have to keep owning your own career development and keep looking beyond your
Absolutely.
mentor.
That's
So you
perfect
mentioned
recap.
women. I want to pull on that. Can you speak to what is some of your advice for young women who face that double-edged sword of seeking leadership positions and being turned down, perhaps because they don't embody, let's say traditional leadership qualities that we might associate with masculine leadership. But then, of course, the flip side is when they do try to demonstrate those traditional leadership qualities, they're punished for not being likable, for example.
Yeah. I always say if you're getting out there in the land of ego and biases and that whole thing, and you're trying to change your behavior to image manage what other people might receive, you're a long ways from authenticity. And for me, I guess I gave up a long time ago. I took little tips like don't bring your purse to a meeting of 12 men when you're the only woman because you take an extra chair for your. I mean, I took some of those tips, but quite honestly, I stopped trying to image manage a long time ago, and the world isn't great now for the genders. But I'm 53. When I first started, when I was showing visibly in my pregnancy, they had a meeting to see if I should be out working with the public
Yeah.
because I was
Sympathy.
visibly pregnant and I was a VP. And so I just started to be more authentic because any of that stuff you get into is story, and your story causes you more pain than your reality because we might quickly say I wasn't valued and they were valued and make up a whole story about how women our ways of thinking aren't valued as much as like male behavior. And instead what I started to do is just pay attention to what I could do for other women and men that would be helpful,
Mm-hmm.
and worry less about myself and worry about helping others. And my philosophy is I believe it will be rewarded in the universe. Let me give you an example. I got really mad one day because I realized that if a female in our group would say something, it was completely dismissed. And this was more than just a story. I started kind of keeping track. And then
Mm-hmm.
5 minutes later, a man would say the exact same thing, and everybody would be like,
Wow,
hallelujah,
what a great
the heavens have
idea.
opened up. Yay. Now, we would get ticked at the men, but the men didn't choose that either, right? The men aren't all sitting around trying to gang up on us. So what we decided to do, and even they talked about this, they did this, the women in the Obama administration, we did this a bit before in our group. When a woman would say something, the rest of the women would jump in and amplify that.
Oh, great.
Now, for everything we do as females, we can step down and be ticked and be victims, or we can step up and say, how can I help?
Great.
And it's not passive, it's not giving up leadership behavior. But if you said something, I wouldn't just let it die on the table, which we women do to one another. I would say, hey, I really want to build on, I think
Mm-hmm.
Anna brought up an amazing point. Let's can we stop and go back to that?
Mm-hmm.
And then if that fizzled out, another one would say, wait a minute, let's go back. I love what is happening here. And we just started to build in that way, and we took it out of how you perceive me and what the story is, and we just started adding value. And I personally believe that once you add value, then you have the confidence to ask for what you need.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of us ask for the chance to show we can add value. My path has always been I first step up and add value, and then I have the courage and confidence to
Mm-hmm.
ask for the pay that that value merits.
Because
And
you can
then we're not
benefit
fighting
from it.
paper dragons. And so,
Interesting.
is it fair that other people don't have to show that and they get it? No, but I tell you what, it really worked for me.
That's great.
So,
That's great. Um, so speaking of stepping forward and asking for what you need, whether that's pay or development opportunities, that really requires the courage of asking for feedback. So let's talk about that a little bit. To grow, you do have to ask for feedback. So for a new hire or an entry level employee, what advice do you have for them to seek it out, and then also how do you react to that feedback?
sure. I just came back from Work Human, and Dr. David Rock talks about feedback, and he talks about the importance of asking for feedback. And so I'll talk about that. And I have a few other things that I think are more valuable than actually asking for feedback. But getting the courage to ask for feedback is what I want people to do. Is instead of going to one or two people and getting the courage to ask for feedback, what you're going to get is their lens and their bias, and it might be helpful. But if you were doing a research project and you were writing a paper and you only had two sources, I would hand the paper back to you and say, you need to do a better lit review. And so a lot of people will ask for feedback from folks that have something to give. You take it as one data point, and if you just see something as one data point, it doesn't take a lot of courage to ask for it. If you see it as a mandate on my career, it takes all this courage to ask for it.
Mm-hmm.
Ask for it in the moment. You walk out of a meeting and ask for it specifically. What's one thing I could have done differently, according to your great experience, that would have really helped that meeting, facilitate that meeting in a better way? Little tiny asks in the moment, conversationally, not confrontational. If you walk in and you're like, I want an hour with you for you to give me feedback, you've really put this big onus on people to almost come up with something. But daily conversation, just and be specific. What's one thing I could do, or what suggestion do you have for me? Which gets us back to crowdsourcing. It's like, I want to do
Same
great
philosophy.
things. Talk to, put it out there to 100 people.
Yeah.
What are the best tips on doing this? Which leads me to feedback is useful, but feedback usually comes through the lens of the ego. And so we found out when we studied high accountables that they are okay with feedback, but what's useful to them is feedback's very short and the opportunity for self-reflection is very long. That accountability and success actually grows out of self-reflection, not necessarily out of feedback. So what I do a lot is I give people assignments for self-reflection, or I take them for myself. So let's say I do get feedback. My ego is going to instantly focus on how that's not right, how I misunderstood, how that was just one time and I did it 3 times a different way. What I ask people to do is I say, don't take my word for it. You ask me for a suggestion. Here's what I think, but don't take my word for it. And I might say, ask 8 other people that question. Go out and ask 8 other people the same question so that you can collect better data. I always send people away from me being the single data point. And if you're struggling with feedback, be good at getting feedback. But if you struggle with it, take your energy and focus on how it could be true as much as you're focusing on how it's not true.
Yeah.
And that gets you mentally flexible so that you can try it on for size. Feedback is always true because there's always a kernel of feedback in there. If you said, Cy, you're a murderer, I would be like, I don't think so. But if I reflect, I'm like, I've murdered people's reputation by talking behind their back. I can always find a way it's true.
Interesting. Great.
So,
we have so much to talk about, but I don't want to go on and on. Let's talk about, for employees who want to grow their leadership skills, and they're at a small, maybe a mid-sized organization. They love working there, but the upward mobility is limited. How can they grow out and still grow their leadership skills?
Yeah, I am really into side hustles. I love Gary Vaynerchuk's work. I want all my people to have side hustles. If you are your experience at your work is what you're using to grow you're going to have a boring life. So, get your own side hustle. Find out what you're fascinated with. Be a student of the world. Volunteer. Get involved on boards outside the organization. And it's not even about building a resume anymore, folks. I don't think we even look that much at resumes. It's about how have you evolved, and are you a global citizen? And therefore, do you bring this huge package to work? Do you know how to learn? Do you know how, are you aware of what's going on in the world? Are you evolving yourself? Do you know your own unconscious biases? Are you are you involved in just the dialogue of the world, not a bunch of opinions and hate and judgment, but are you involved in that dialogue? And
Yeah.
so when I can't write at work, I'm a writer. I know it's because it's not that I need more quiet time at work. It's that I need to go out and read more and engage more.
Get inspired.
Yeah, and be stimulated. And I know you probably do that too from a content perspective.
Um, oh, I had a thought. I think what I was going to say was the next step then. So if you, let's say you find a volunteer gig or you have something else on this as your side hustle and you're learning new skills, the next step from that, I would say, is be aware of what you're learning, because you have to be able to market that. And
Yeah,
recruiters, as much as we would love for all of them to spot those indicators and spot someone with really high
good point.
soft skills, great soft skills and great leadership potential, a lot of recruiters are still looking at their resumes and looking at titles and looking at the actions and
True.
results, which is important, but it is still largely, I would say, up to the job seeker or the employee to say, no, I'm really good at communication, I'm really good at empathy, I'm really good at
Yeah.
all these other things that I've learned, and this is how I've done that.
And what I love about that is so many times we report what we've done. Like I was involved in sports in college, and instead of what we got competent in,
Yeah.
I got competent in inspiring a team when we were behind
Yeah.
and they were focusing on the bad call of the ref to knock it off and focus on putting enough points on the board that we could outlive a bad ref call.
Cool.
It's like really that features and benefits. Features is I played college sports. Benefits is, and here's what that means to you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and challenging recruiters' assumptions about what your experience may have been. So if your story only says I was the captain of this team, the HR recruiter might think one thing about you,
Mm-hmm.
but if you tell a story like that, wow, all of a sudden you've become a different person with different attributes.
And that's the important point. I just talked to a very successful gentleman. His daughter was interviewing for the Clinton Foundation. And she said, Dad, what should I tell people about me? And he said, don't tell people about you. Let them ask. And it was interesting. He said, because the first thing you tell them is what they make up your mind you are. And this had to do a little bit with her background and ethnicity. And it was interesting because just be very careful of what you say about you without, if you are going to say it, providing the rest of the story, because when you put out a sentence, you are a magnet for everybody's biases.
Mm-hmm.
And so put out a sentence and then break through bias by helping people understand how it's probably not what you think.
Can you say more about that? So, because I think that's a really tough concept for someone who doesn't have a lot of, first of all, interviewing experience,
Sure.
let alone professional experience, to wait. Because I think the story that they hear from career services, from their moms and dads, tell who you are, market your skills, explain how awesome you are. But I'm hearing you say,
It's a little bit different. I'm a little sophisticated when I coach people, and I don't want you playing games in the interview on your first job. But instead of let me tell you about me and I get into presenting, I say, you know what, I've taken a look at some of the goals of the organization. What are some of the top goals for this particular group I'm interviewing for? Because I want to know what their top goals are, and then I'll help you connect the dots on how I can really impact those goals. And so now I'm really into, like, I'm going to ask you a question and then tell you how I think I can have impact. Now, you have to be very conversant. You have to have done your pre-work, like you said, to be conversant on how that applies. And so, instead of coming in and saying, oh my gosh, I don't have expertise there, but I have all this expertise, what are your goals? And, one thing I think I could really impact with is I am a crazy sleuth on the internet, and I am so good at gathering information that I could feed the team a constant source of what other people are doing and what's new and benchmarking. And even though I don't come in with a lot of expertise, I come in with really knowing how to feed you guys what's out there for you to use your expertise and make some better decisions. It's like getting really clear about the value you add, but not overplaying it's not about the positions you held, and it's not about being captain of the basketball team. It's about life learning. But you can't do this if you haven't self-reflected on a regular basis about what that experience meant to you.
Yeah, it really does come down to self-awareness.
It really does. Like
Important.
one of my interviews, they said, "What do you think was the most valuable thing you did in college?" And I blew her away. I said, "I was a designated driver. I saved lives." She's like, "What?" I go, "I made a point that on key evenings, I would volunteer to be the designated driver. I held people when they cried. I, cleaned puke out of my car. But people knew I cared about them. And I didn't tell people I was anti-drinking because I wasn't. I love good glasses of wine." And she was really shocked. And I said, "Here's how this translates for you. I will be the person who will be on the outskirts, but I will make sure nobody falls off the cliff. I'm non-judgmental. I don't judge you in the moment. I'll get you home safely, and then we'll talk the next morning."
Excellent.
And that just blew them away. And I don't want to go too long on this, but this is features and benefits, folks. It's sales. When I went to buy a car, the guy who sold me a car didn't talk to me about the engine and all the safety record. He knew I had a couple of kids. He goes, "Oh my gosh, this is a built-in car seat. What that means is that your husband can never say he can't pick up the kids because he doesn't have the car seat." I'm like, dang. I'm like, bots, right? He goes, there's internal headphones so that when you're driving, you can listen to NPR and you don't have to listen to Barney music. And like, I got home and my husband's like, "Did you buy a car?" I go, "I did." He goes, "What kind is it?" I go, "Let's go check."
I don't even know.
And that's what you can only do through good self-reflection by understanding what the company needs, and then not what you can do for them, but what you can add in as far as a tool for them, like what you can add in as a valuable asset.
Great.
And none of us have experience in what's next. And so that's to get away from the experience part, because most of our jobs aren't even going to exist 5 years from now.
Yeah.
So when people are like, "You have no experience," go, "Well, no one does. I don't have experience in what's next."
What's coming, right?
Yeah.
So I want to ask you one more question, if you're up for it.
Yes.
How can a new professional walk the balance, the fine line between they want to provide their opinions, they want to give their ideas, they want to show that they are, and I have a feeling I know what you're going to say, show that they're smart and critical thinkers and they have something to offer. So at a meeting, for example, walk that balance, push in their own ideas and advocating for themselves, and then, but without being too, I don't want to say pushy, let's say disrespecting, their superiors' ideas. You know what I'm trying to ask?
Yeah.
I hope I said that appropriately.
Absolutely. So in a couple of my books, I talk about the difference between opinions and expertise. Now, a lot of times opinions focus on why that won't work, and we need to always be managing how we could make it work. Ego is, I know the way, I know how it should be done. Confidence is, I'm confident in some of the things I can bring to the table. And so it's a difference between typical theater, where I learn the script and then force you to say your lines, and improv. So if you want your opinions heard, if somebody brings something up, don't negate it. Absolutely authenticate it. It's like, you know what? Love where you're going with that. I think the main goal there is to, help sales get done what they need done. Here's another idea I have. If I can build on that, what if we did X? And then keep your ego out of it. If the conversation wanders, don't do this whole like, "Well, I brought it up and no one listened and I'm undervalued." We're crowdsourcing. You're a data point. Be a good data point. And so bring it up again if it seems helpful, but really watch yourself. And if you're moving through life with expectations, like, "I want to prove that I'm adding value," stop. Move through with great expectancy that I'm going to show up, I'm going to offer what I can, and the universe has the rest of it. And because that's authentic, and that is operating at a higher frequency, that will attract that higher frequency. And so don't go in guns blazing. If you have a great idea, awesome. If you brought it up and people didn't seem to understand it, write some more about it. But be kind to your audience. Don't put a gun to their head, and don't lay all your story on them that they don't value or they're disappointed. Folks, that's just a business meeting. That's just how it goes, is that sometimes we have to hear ideas multiple times. In fact, neuroscience would tell you if it's important, you have to hear something 3 times within a few minutes in order for it to register. So I don't know if that's helpful, but is that what you expected me to say?
Along those lines, yeah. Ego. Knew that was going to come up.
And you guys, for all the young folks out there, trust the process. I'm not here to hold you back, and you do not need to pay your dues, and you do not need to put up with old school crap. But trust the process. When you speak, find out who's willing and what light bulbs go off and who some of the people are that are friendly to your message, and then work with those willing. Stop trying to convert the biggest naysayer. When you were little and you played tag, if you're playing tag, you don't go running after the person farthest away from you the fastest. You go to the person right next to you. You don't need consensus. You need to connect with people resonating at a similar frequency that recognize, it's kind of like namaste. I recognize you, you recognize me. Gather those folks. Those small groups are what get business done anyway.
Very well said. Great insight, Cy. Thank you so much. I appreciate your philosophy on leadership, the really very based in reality and authenticity. Good to hear your words of wisdom. Thanks for joining us.
You're welcome. If people want to know more, if you're going to get distracted on your phone at work, we want to be your distraction. Really? So like
distract you.
At Cy Wakeman, Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube.
Cool.
We have a great podcast called No Ego. If you want to learn more about this as you're entering into the workforce especially, hit us up. We have a lot out there for you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.